Okay, so, we talk about a lot of big problems facing India,
Right.
and some issues just kind of jump right to the front.
Yeah.
Um, but, today, I think we're going to look at something that's a bit more under the surface.
Okay.
It's it's still a huge public health crisis.
Yeah.
Like, it really affects millions and millions of people,
Yeah.
especially children.
Especially children. Yeah.
But, you know, it just doesn't get talked about as much, and that's lead poisoning.
Lead poisoning, right?
Yeah, and, for anyone out there, especially, if you're getting ready for those UPSC exams,
Right.
looking at all these, like, dense reports.
Yeah. It's a lot.
It's a lot. And it's like a whole other thing on top of everything else you've got to get ready for.
Absolutely.
But that's what we're here for, right?
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, we're going to kind of dive deep into this.
Yeah, deep dive.
And hopefully give you a really solid understanding of what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
It's about making you crazy.
exactly, yeah, like no information overload here, right?
Yeah. No, we've actually, we've already done all that heavy lifting for you.
Okay, good.
And we're going to be drawing on information from a bunch of different sources, like the World Health Organization.
Okay, the WHO?
WHO, yep. And UNICEF Pure Earth.
Got it.
The CSR Nidhi Ayog.
And remind me what CSR Nidhi Ayog is again.
Oh, of course. So that's the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, and then that's hyphenated with the National Institution for Transforming India.
Okay, perfect. So we've got, global organizations, we've got Indian institutions.
Yep. And then we've also got a bunch of different Indian legal acts that we'll be looking at.
Okay, so we're really kind of covering this from all sides.
All different angles.
Yeah. And I guess our mission here with this deep dive.
Yeah. Our mission is pretty simple. We want to take all that essential information about lead poisoning in India
Okay.
and make it, understandable for anyone.
Right, like we were just saying.
Exactly. But we also want to make it really relevant.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially for folks who are,
Who are getting ready for those exams.
who are prepping for UPSC. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So lead poisoning, I mean, I think we've all heard of that.
Right.
But let's go back to the basics for a second.
Sure.
What is lead?
Okay, so lead is a heavy metal,
Okay.
and it's naturally occurring, so it's found in the Earth's crust.
Okay, so it's just out there.
It's just out there, yeah.
Okay.
And it has a couple of kind of specific properties, like physically.
Okay.
So it's pretty soft, it's easy to shape, and it's got this kind of bluish-white color
Okay.
when it's freshly cut.
Interesting.
Yeah. But the thing about lead, the most important thing, the thing that you have to remember about it, is that the WHO, the World Health Organization, they've said pretty clearly that there is no safe level of lead exposure.
No safe level.
No safe level.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so even like a tiny little bit.
Even a tiny bit can be bad.
Okay, wow, that's scary.
Yeah. And so to give you an idea of how serious this is,
Yeah.
the WHO, they rank lead as one of the top 10 chemicals.
Out of everything.
Out of everything, yeah.
Wow.
That are a major public health concern.
A major public health concern. Wow.
And they're so serious about this that in 2021,
What?
they put out these guidelines.
Okay.
And these guidelines say that if anyone has a blood lead level,
So if they test their blood.
if they test their blood, yep,
Okay.
5 micrograms per deciliter
Okay.
or higher,
Okay.
which that's written as DGD.
Okay, 5 GDL.
5 GDL or higher.
Got it.
Then they have to figure out where that lead is coming from.
Okay.
Like they have to really assess it
Okay.
and then get rid of the source of the lead.
Wow. So it's taken very seriously.
They take it very seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah, and 5 micrograms per deciliter? I know that sounds tiny.
Yeah, it sounds like almost nothing.
It's a really small amount,
Yeah.
but that's what makes it so dangerous.
Okay, I see.
Because even those little tiny amounts, especially in kids in developing bodies, can have a huge impact on their health.
Wow, that's scary.
Yeah, and historically and even today,
Yeah.
one of the biggest sources of lead exposure globally
Okay.
is lead-based paint.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a big problem.
Yeah.
And so there's this group called the Global Alliance to Eliminate Lead Paint.
Okay.
And it's run by the WHO and the UNEP, the United Nations Environment Program.
Okay, got it.
And they're really pushing countries to ban lead paint.
Good.
But it's slow going.
Really?
Yeah. As of January of this year, 2024,
Okay.
only 48% of countries have actually banned lead paint.
Wow. That's less than half.
Yeah, it's less than half.
Okay, so that's kind of the global situation.
Right.
What about here in India?
Okay, so in India,
I mean, we have a lot of people.
we have a lot of people.
So I imagine that the lead problem is probably pretty big.
It's a big problem, yeah.
Yeah.
So globally, it's estimated that about 1/3 of all children are affected by lead poisoning.
Wow, 1/3.
Yeah, and then if we zoom in on India specifically, there was this report in 2020 from UNICEF and Pure Earth.
Okay.
And they found that something like half of India's children have high blood lead levels.
Half.
Half.
That's a huge number.
It's a huge number.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're talking about something like 275 million children in India.
275 million.
Yeah, who have blood lead levels above that 5 GDL limit that the WHO sets.
Yeah.
And even within that group, there's about 64.3 million kids who have even higher levels.
Okay.
Like above 10 GDL.
So they're even more at risk.
Yeah, even more at risk.
Okay. And is this like in certain areas or is it kind of everywhere?
It's pretty widespread. The CSR and NITI Aayog did a report.
Okay.
And they said that 23 states in India.
Out of how many?
There's 28 states.
Okay, so most of them.
Most of them, yeah.
Okay.
Have average blood lead levels that are higher than that recommended limit.
Okay, so it really is a nationwide issue.
It's everywhere.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier that there are economic consequences too.
Right. So this is a public health crisis. Right.
But it also affects the economy. So it's estimated that lead poisoning is responsible for about 5% of India's GDP loss.
5% of GDP?
Yeah.
That's massive.
It's a lot of money. And it's because, lead can affect people's cognitive abilities.
Oh, okay.
So people can't be as productive.
I see.
And then there are the healthcare costs.
Yeah, of course.
So all of that adds up to a huge burden on the economy.
5% of GDP, that's just incredible to me.
It's a huge impact.
Yeah. Okay, so we know that lead is toxic.
Right.
We know that it's a big problem in India.
Yeah.
But how are people actually getting exposed to lead?
So there are a lot of different ways.
Okay.
Back in the day, leaded gasoline was a big one.
Oh, yeah. Like the fumes?
The fumes, yeah.
Okay.
But thankfully, India got rid of that in 2000.
Okay, good.
But there are still other sources of lead.
Okay, like what?
So lead-based paint is still a big problem.
Oh, the paint itself.
The paint itself, yeah, can kind of chip and flake off.
Oh, and then it gets into the dust in the soil.
Let's see.
And there's lead in some consumer products.
Okay, what kind of consumer products are we talking about?
Some toys, traditional cookware.
Okay.
Even some traditional medicines and cosmetics can have lead in them.
Wow. Okay, so it's not just like one thing. It's a lot of different sources.
It's a lot of different sources, yeah.
Okay.
And then there's also industrial pollution.
Okay.
Like from battery recycling.
Oh, okay.
So those factories can release lead into the environment.
I see.
And you asked about symptoms?
Yeah, what are the symptoms of lead poisoning?
So they can be pretty varied.
Okay.
And sometimes they're hard to spot.
Especially if it's like a low level of exposure?
Exactly. So people might feel tired.
Okay.
Have stomach aches, nausea, diarrhea.
Okay.
Lose their appetite.
Okay, so just kind of general.
Yeah, general not feeling well.
Right.
And then more severe symptoms can be things like anemia.
Okay.
Muscle weakness. And then there's this one sign that's kind of specific to lead poisoning.
Okay.
Which is a dark line that can appear along the gums.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, sometimes it's called a lead line.
Lead line. Okay, I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, it's pretty distinctive.
Okay. And, the source material also mentions mercury poisoning.
Right.
Is that kind of a similar problem?
It is similar.
Like it's another environmental health issue.
Exactly.
Yeah, maybe we can do a whole deep dive on that sometime.
Yeah, that would be a good one.
But for now, we're sticking with lead.
Lead for today.
Okay, so clearly this has been a problem in India for a while.
Definitely.
What are some of the things that the government has done to try to deal with it?
So they've done a few things.
Okay, good.
One of the biggest things was banning leaded petrol in 2000.
Oh, yeah, that was a big deal.
Yeah, that was huge.
Yeah.
And that was great for public health.
Of course, getting the lead out of the air.
Exactly. But it was also good for the environment in general. Well, it reduced air pollution.
Okay, yeah.
And it actually made car engines run better and last longer.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it was kind of a win-win.
Yeah, so that was a big step.
And it also put India in line with what other countries were doing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a lot of countries were getting rid of leaded petrol around that time.
Okay, so India was kind of joining the global movement.
Exactly.
Okay, so that was one big thing. What else?
So there are a bunch of other laws and regulations.
Okay.
One of the main ones is the Environment Protection Act of 1986.
Okay.
And that act basically gives the central government the power to regulate lead contamination.
Okay.
And they do that through the Central Pollution Control Board, the CPCB.
Okay.
So the CPCB sets limits on how much lead can be in industrial waste and things like that.
Okay, so they're kind of controlling it at the source.
Exactly, okay.
And then what about workplaces?
So workplaces are covered by the Factories Act of 1948.
Okay.
Now, this act is mainly about worker health and safety, but it does address lead poisoning indirectly.
Okay, how so?
So Chapter 3 of the Act is all about occupational health and hygiene.
Okay.
And lead poisoning and lead tetraethyl poisoning are both listed as notifiable diseases.
Okay, so if someone gets sick at work?
The employer has to report it.
Got it.
Yeah, so that helps to track the problem.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've got the environment, we've got workplaces.
Right.
What about just like people in their homes? Like how are they protected?
So there are a few things for that too.
Okay, okay.
There's this thing called the Code of Practice for Water Supply in Buildings.
Okay.
It's from 1957, so it's pretty old.
Wow, okay.
But it says that you can't use lead pipes for domestic water supply.
Okay, so no lead pipes in the house.
Right, and it sets a limit for how much lead can be in drinking water.
Okay, what's the limit?
It's 10 micrograms per liter.
Okay, got it.
But there's one exception, which is for flushing and overflow systems.
Oh, okay, so there could still be lead in those parts of the plumbing.
Yeah, so that's something to be aware of.
Yeah, I guess you wouldn't really think about that.
Right.
Okay. And then are there any newer regulations?
Yeah, so in 2021...
Okay, fairly recent.
Fairly recent, yeah.
Right.
They came out with the lead stabilizers in PVC pipes rules.
Okay.
And that basically bans lead from being used in PVC pipes.
Okay, so that's like a very specific...
Very specific, yeah.
Target.
Target, yeah.
Okay, what about lead in paint?
So for paint, we have the Insecticides Act of 1968.
Okay.
Now, this act is all about regulating insecticides.
Okay.
But Schedule 2 of the act still lists lead arsenate as an insecticide.
Really?
Yeah, and that's kind of interesting because lead arsenate was banned in 2019.
Oh, so the law hasn't caught up.
Not quite, yeah.
Okay, we'll have to come back soon.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Okay. What about food?
So for food, we have the Food Safety and Standards Act of 2006.
Okay.
And that act gives a lot of power to the FSSAI, the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India. And they set limits on how much lead can be in different foods.
Okay.
So, for example, there are limits for turmeric, leafy vegetables, pulses, sugar, even infant food.
Wow. Okay, so they're really thinking about all the different things that people eat.
Exactly.
Okay.
And they also regulate the lead content in drinking water.
Okay.
And they use the BIS standard, which is 0.01 milligrams per liter.
Okay, got it.
And another important thing that the FSSAI has done is they've banned lead chromate from being used in spices.
Lead chromate, and why was that?
So lead chromate is a really toxic lead compound.
Okay.
And it was being used in some spices.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was a big win for food safety.
Okay, so it sounds like they're being pretty proactive.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, what about waste?
So for hazardous waste, we have the Hazardous Waste Management Rules of 2016.
Okay.
And those rules say that anything with lead in it is considered hazardous waste.
Okay.
And there are very specific rules about how to store it, treat it, and dispose of it.
Okay, so it's taken very seriously.
Very seriously, yeah.
Okay.
And for lead-acid batteries.
Okay, like car batteries.
Like car batteries,
Okay.
yeah. We have the Batteries Waste Management Rules of 2022.
Okay.
And those rules are based on something called extended producer responsibility.
Extended producer responsibility, what's that?
So it basically means that the manufacturers of the batteries are responsible for making sure that they're recycled properly.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, so they have to set up systems for collecting and recycling the batteries.
Okay, so it's not just on the consumer to figure out what to do with them.
Right, the manufacturers have to take responsibility.
Okay, that's good.
And then even cosmetics are regulated.
Really?
Yeah, under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act of 1940.
Wow, that's an old one.
It is an old one.
Okay.
But it sets a limit on how much lead can be in cosmetics.
Okay, what's the limit?
It's 20 parts per million.
Okay.
And manufacturers and importers have to make sure that their products comply with that limit.
Got it. And I guess they have to label the ingredients.
Right, so people know what's in their cosmetics.
Okay, so that's good.
And finally,
Yeah.
There's the Child Labor Act of 1986.
Okay.
And that one's really important because it prohibits child labor in hazardous occupations.
Of course, that includes anything involving lead.
Absolutely. So that helps to protect children from being exposed to lead at work.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then there's also the Bureau of Indian Standards Act of 2016.
Okay.
And that act basically sets up the BIS, the Bureau of Indian Standards, as the national standards body.
Okay.
So they're responsible for making sure that all kinds of products meet certain quality standards.
Okay.
And that includes setting limits on how much lead can be in things like kitchenware.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
like pots and pans.
Exactly.
Okay, so it sounds like there are a lot of different laws and regulations.
There are a lot.
Yeah, covering all sorts of different areas.
Right.
But our source material says that there are also some challenges when it comes to implementing all of these regulations.
Right. And that's a really important point. So one of the biggest challenges is that there isn't really a comprehensive legal framework.
Okay, so it's all kind of piecemeal.
It's piecemeal, yeah.
Yeah.
So there are all these different rules scattered across different acts.
Yeah, and that can be confusing.
It can be confusing, yeah.
And it makes it hard to enforce the rules.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's look at some specific examples.
Sure.
We talked about lead insecticides earlier.
Right.
And how lead arsenate is still listed as an approved insecticide, even though it was banned in 2019.
Right. That's a perfect example of this problem.
Yeah. So what's going on there?
Well, you've got the Insecticides Act, which is old.
Right.
And then you've got a more recent ban from the Ministry of Agriculture.
Yeah.
And those two things aren't really talking to each other.
Yeah, it's like a disconnect.
Exactly.
And so what does that mean for farmers?
It means they're getting mixed messages.
Right. Because the law says one thing, but then
the ministry says something else.
Yeah.
And that creates a lot of confusion.
Yeah. And it makes it hard to enforce the ban.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's one example. What about lead in food?
So the FSSAI has done a good job of banning lead chromate in spices.
Right.
But they still allow up to 10 parts per million of lead in other foods.
Oh, okay. So there's still some lead allowed.
Yeah, and that's a bit of a loophole.
Okay, how so?
Well, they've banned the really bad stuff.
Right.
But they're still allowing a certain amount of lead.
Yeah.
And that could still be harmful, especially over time.
So it's kind of like a half measure?
Yeah, it's not a complete solution.
Okay, what about lead-based paint?
So the 2016 rules are good because they set limits on lead in new paint.
Okay.
But they don't do anything about the old paint that's already out there.
Oh, yeah, like in old houses and stuff?
Exactly.
Okay, and that's a problem because...
Because that old paint can still be chipping and flaking off.
Right, and getting into the dust and soil.
Exactly.
And then kids are playing in the dust.
And they're getting exposed to lead.
Okay, so that's a big gap in the regulations. Okay, and then finally, what about water?
So for water, the problem is mainly about enforcement.
Okay.
So you've got the Code of Practice for Water Supply in Buildings, which is old.
Right.
And you've got the newer lead stabilizers in PVC pipes rules.
Yeah.
But both of those rules need to be enforced properly.
Otherwise, they're not really doing anything.
Exactly.
Okay, so it sounds like the regulations are there.
Yeah, the intentions are good.
Yeah.
But the implementation is lagging behind.
Right, so what can be done about that?
So our source material has a few suggestions.
Okay, let's hear them.
So the first suggestion is to create a stronger legal framework.
Okay, like a more unified approach.
Exactly. So instead of having all these different rules scattered around,
Yeah.
they suggest creating a whole new set of rules specifically about lead.
Okay.
And they say that these rules should be part of the Environment Protection Act of 1986.
Okay, so it's all under one umbrella.
Exactly. That would make things much clearer and easier to enforce.
Okay, that makes sense.
The second suggestion is to establish a safe blood lead level.
A safe blood lead level, so like a national standard.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So we know the WHO guidelines.
Right, but India needs its own standard.
Right, something that's specific to India.
Okay.
And that would give everyone a clear target to aim for.
Yeah, and it would make it easier to measure progress.
Exactly.
Okay. Well,
So the third suggestion is to adopt stricter occupational safety standards.
okay, so this is about protecting workers.
Protecting workers, yeah.
Okay.
And the source material suggests looking at what other countries are doing.
Oh, like best practices from around the world?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Any examples?
So the U.S. has OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration,
Okay.
and the U.K. has the Control of Lead at Work regulations.
Right.
And those are both really good examples of strong regulations.
Okay, so India could learn from them.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's stronger laws, safer workplaces.
Right.
But what about making sure that people actually follow the rules?
So that's where stricter enforcement comes in.
Okay.
So the source material says that there need to be clear penalties for breaking the rules.
Okay, so like fines or something.
Fines, yeah, or even jail time in some cases.
Wow. Okay, so they're serious.
They're serious about this, yeah.
And which industries should be targeted for enforcement?
So the ones that are most at risk, like industries that process lead.
Okay.
Water supply companies.
Okay.
And toy manufacturers.
Okay, yeah, because kids are especially vulnerable.
Exactly.
And are there any international standards for toy safety?
Yeah, there's the EU Toy Safety Directive.
Okay.
That's a really good example of a strong standard.
Okay, so India could look to that as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got stronger laws, safer workplaces, stricter enforcement.
Right.
But it sounds like it's not just about the government.
It's not just about the government, no.
Yeah. What else needs to happen?
So the source material talks about public awareness and market incentives.
Okay, so getting the public involved.
Exactly. So the idea is to promote lead-free products.
Okay, like making them more available and more affordable.
Right. So the government could offer tax breaks to companies that make lead-free products.
Okay, that's a good idea.
And they could also launch big public awareness campaigns.
Okay, so educating people about the dangers of lead.
Exactly, and letting them know that there are safer alternatives out there.
Yeah, because a lot of people might not even know.
Right, they might not be aware of the problem.
Okay, so that's a really important part of the solution.
It's crucial.
Okay, so to sum up,
yeah,
it sounds like lead poisoning is a big problem in India.
It's a huge problem, and it's affecting millions of people.
Especially children.
Especially children, yeah.
And there are laws and regulations in place.
There are, yeah.
But there are also challenges when it comes to implementing and enforcing those regulations.
Exactly.
And so the way forward is to create a stronger legal framework, establish a safe blood lead level, adopt stricter occupational safety standards, and enforce the rules more strictly.
And don't forget about public awareness and market incentives.
Oh, yeah, that's a key part of it, too.
It is, yeah.
Okay, so this is clearly a complex issue.
It is.
But hopefully this deep dive has given you a better understanding of what's going on.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, and, especially if you're a UPSC aspirant.
Right.
This is really important stuff to know.
It's a crucial current affairs topic.
Yeah.
And it could definitely come up in the mains exam.
Yeah.
And even in the prelims, they might ask about environmental health issues.
Right. So this is all very relevant.
Very relevant, yeah.
Okay, so if you found this helpful,
yeah,
please like and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives on important topics.
And if you have any questions,
yeah, leave a comment below.
We'd love to hear from you.
And we'll try our best to answer your questions.
Absolutely.
And the main source that we used for this deep dive was an article from Business Line.
Right. So if you want to read more about this issue,
yeah, check out that article.
It's a great resource.
Okay. And as a final thought,
yeah,
we've talked about all these different regulations, but think about your own life.
Yeah.
Are there other ways that you might be exposed to lead?
That you might not even be aware of.
Yeah, it's something to think about.
It is, yeah.
Okay, so thank you for joining us for this deep dive on lead poisoning in India.
Thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time.